A little bit about the genesis of this program. It started, not coincidentally, with a conversation. And in as much as Jim's life has been, his life, his career, everything he does has been one ongoing conversation, it really is no coincidence. We were in a coffee shop at Jones's Bakery. I saw Jim there. I was getting a cup of coffee. I decided to stop. It was last winter. After 20 minutes of fascinating, random conversation, I was going back to my office and I thought, man, he ought to be interviewed. So I made just a few phone calls. And I got the same enthusiastic, unanimous response from everybody I called. They all said the same thing. Great idea. But you're not going to do the interviewing, are you? Jim graciously agreed. Greg signed on. That was key, of course. And Jim, of course, just had one condition. You're not going to do the interview, are you? I said, Jim, I got Greg signed up. And it was funny, that was kind of the response I got from everybody I talked about it, except my mom, God bless her. And she was indignant. She said, what do you mean you're not doing the interview? I said, Mom. She said, well, who's doing it? I said, Greg Peterson. She said, oh, what a lovely man. God bless you. In the end, if you interview Jim Roselle or you're interviewed by Greg Peterson, you're at the top. Greg, by the way, I'm not going to give you Greg's resume, because if you don't, okay.
One thing hanging around with Phil Calla, one learns the axiom that the mind can absorb only what the rear can endure. So when Phil talks, keep that always in mind. Thank you, Phil, for those kind words. I am really thrilled to be able to have a little role reversal tonight, to have an opportunity to talk to Jim Roselle. Perhaps we can learn a little bit more about the guy who's on the other side of being from interviewer to interviewee. I'll tell you a quick story that Jim has called me a couple times. He even called my house trying to extract from my wife what's going to go on tonight. Also inquiring as to, well, what questions I might be asking. Greg, how's it going to work? This, and this. So finally, having listened to this yesterday, Jim, I said, let me just give you a little comment. And the comment is this. A few years ago, I had the pleasure of interviewing Phil Donahue, who's done a few of these. And again, same thing. Phil would ask, how's it going to work? What are the questions? Give me the format, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd explain it to him. And then finally, he concluded by saying, Greg, let me just wrap up. Can you one more time explain what's going to happen? I paused, and I said, you know, tomorrow I will be Phil Donahue, and you won't. Similarly, yesterday, right, Jim? I said, having told that same story to Jim, tonight, I will be Jim Roselle, and you won't. So I look forward to this. I look forward to the fact, principally because he's a hero to one and all. And you can't help but reflect on really the last 60 years of the history of Jamestown and not think about Jim Roselle in so many forms or fashions. And whether it's the sock hops, whether it's the things, a tremendous amount. In fact, what's the number of programs that we calculated at Chautauqua? Thousands.
Over 1,800.
Over 1,800 type of programs that Jim has done at Chautauqua alone. And he's brought our community to a whole different level. And it's just an honor that we can pause, reflect, and maybe again learn a little bit about him. I'm going to show you something here, which I frankly forgot that I actually did. In 2007 was just one of those days at Chautauqua Institution. It was the last week of Chautauqua, and there's a lot going on programmatically the last week at Chautauqua. And so, shocking, I had my camcorder with me, and I don't want to say I violated any copyright laws or stuff, but you'll see some things that you wonder, how did he do that? But it's one day, frankly, at Chautauqua. It's one day at Chautauqua in August of 2007, and there'll be a little bit of programs, because I know he was at the program, and basically it was advice that he received during the 9th week of Chautauqua, a little 5-minute vignette, and I just thought this might set the tone.
Instead of going to my lecture today, go back to your cabins and try a new position. While you now, that said, those of you who have a partner, I know I'm a widow. I know very well that there are many widows, more widows than widowers, and I will say something later on about that. I don't have a solution for that. I'm not saying I'm old-fashioned and a square. Don't walk around and pick up somebody else's man. I would raise my eyebrows. What should I say next?
I'll show you. No. Okay, Dr. Ruth. Okay, here I go. Are you ready? How many positions are there?
Endless, because the human mind is endless in its imagination. And now, somebody of a certain age, Jim, cannot hang from a chandelier anymore. There are certain positions you have to say, not for me now. However, it's
Hanging
endless.
from a chandelier?
Some people
A few years ago, my career would have ended with that.
mine too, so we would have ended
Just like that. I'd have been looking for work. But today, as they say, the tag and kiss at you. The tag and kiss. Yeah, that's it.
Sex without love is a lonesome thing. But as lonesome things go, it's way up there. I'm going to listen to her lecture. It was 10:45. I'm going to be over there. And ever the sex therapist, right now as we speak, Dr. Ruth is over at the Athenaeum helping a gentleman get the cap off of his Viagra bottle. Did you see, by the way, it's amazing the way the institution schedules these theme weeks. They had a sex therapy week about 3 years ago. We called it Nostalgia Week here at Chautauqua. And in yesterday's New York Times, there's a front page article about how seniors are having rampant sex more than ever before. In fact, they're going to redo Sex in the City. This time around, it's going to star Wilfred Brimley and Betty White. And so the whole idea, because I've listened to these lectures, you know, and the whole idea, it's romance. As I say, yeah, sex without love is lonely, but it's with two partners, right? Notice I said partners because, you know, and so, but the whole idea...
Don't use the word, no, I'm not going to use
the whole idea is to create a romantic atmosphere. Soft lights, candlelight, romantic music, and this is the most important, selecting just the right Halloween mask.
You always worry about whether I'm going to pause for commercials or not.
I worry because it's your livelihood. You know, if we all worry. If we go a little too long, I say, oh my goodness, they don't have a commercial coming
Yeah,
up.
we got commercials coming up.
And poor Jim's going to have to go door to door. Okay, let her roll.
We pause for these commercials. We'll be back with Mark Russell.
Don't stay goodbye. Can we give our love just one more try? Come on, baby. Let's start anew. He's breaking up his heart to do. Breaking up is all so hard to do. Thank you so much.
Come up with a question. Number of positions. Number of positions when you asked Dr. Ruth. How did that come to your mind, you know?
I did some research. I want to know if I was lacking any. No, seriously, Greg, you couldn't help but anticipate the opportunity to talk to a lady that has given advice over that many years, you know, and she was so engaging. She gave me a warm greeting, gave me a hug, and then we sat down and did the interview. And I remember asking, you know, about age, and she said, well, Jim, I think you're in the age where you're not going to be able to do it swinging from the chandelier anymore. I mean, stuff like that.
Yeah.
You can't beat it. And she was just an ideal. You would have loved the opportunity to chat with her, Greg.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But no more so than the opportunity to chat with you right now.
Well, thank you very much.
Was it Marv Levy that once said, where would you rather be than right here, right now? So here we are, Jim. By the way, speaking of being right here, right now, we're at the Jackson Center. And one of the things we recently had was having Chief Justice Roberts here. And one of the requirements was there was no media. No media. So I'm here to report that the only person who broke the rules of the United States Supreme Court and barged right ahead into the Jackson Center was Jim Roselle. And so that nobody got embarrassed, Jim Johnson, who is not here, but as our president and CEO, saw Jim walk in with microphone looking for action, looking for something that nobody else could get to, and he actually made sure you weren't thrown out by the marshals and took your media card back. So I'm here to return your media for the...
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Can I take a moment here, Greg? Personal moment.
You know, I've been at these kind of interviews before, right, Juanita, where Dorothy Cotton just threw me aside. And...
No, I want to do it before this night ends, and I'd be regretting the fact I didn't do it. But let me tell the audience here that the Rotary Club that's staging this event, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Rotary Club. And I'll tell you the story. The Rotary Club opened a boys' club in 1939. They took an abandoned Y building, the Nordic Temple. The Y left that facility and built their new home on 4th Street. And they opened a boys' club in a building that had a pool, a gym, and a game room. And their idea was that it appealed to, it would offer what we called the other side of the tracks, the kids that couldn't afford the Y. It would give them a facility to enjoy a lot of activity. Now stop and think of the decision they made. I mean, they put themselves in a big responsible position to find a director and have the funds to guide that club along. And they did it. I mean, they opened that club, and that was our salvation. That was our second home. We lived there. And we had a fabulous director named Mr. Robert Clements, who ran the club for 6 years. He was not only a director for the club, but he was a teacher. He taught us teamwork, sportsmanship, and values. And he left the club in 1945 to operate a boys' club in Brooklyn. And then he moved to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And we missed him. So in 1951, it was a suggestion by Frank Morato and Joe Penabianco and talking to me, and they said, let's go visit Mr. Clements. Let's go surprise him. So I said, well, we'll make the call. So I called him. I said, Bob, we'd love to come and say hello to you. Oh, he said, we'd be delighted. Ro and I would be happy to see you. And then, in a way, kiddingly, I said to him, can you give me an audition at a radio station? Because I frankly didn't have a full-time job. I was part-time at JTN, part-time, 10 minutes a night, part-time. My first show was 10 minutes on Sunday for $3. So I just put that thought to him, and he was a member of the Rotary Club, by the way. And when we got there, I completely forgot about the question and wondered if anything, I didn't even wonder if anything happened. We sat down to dinner that night, and suddenly he said to me, Jim, I've got an audition for you tomorrow morning at WHGB. He says, I'll take you down. I've got to open the boys' club. You go to the audition, and then to get back home, take bus number so-and-so. So I did. Much to my surprise, they offered me the job that moment. I was literally, shocked. And I just thought, I've got a lot of things to do. My first thought was, I've got to tell Cy Goldman that I'm not going to do part-time any longer. Like a big deal, 2-week notice. And secondly, I had to find a place to live and make the arrangements. And ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, Mr. Clemens said, you don't have to find a place. You're living with us. So I lived with Bob and Ro for 1.5 years. And then I wanted to come back home. I missed my family. I missed my friends. And I thought I'd love to be back home. And fortunately, I found a 3-month job in Warren, Pennsylvania, and then a job opened up at WJTN in September of 1951. Here I am. No, that was 1953. Here I am, 60 years later. Greg, please understand in the audience, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Rotary Club.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Phil, I hope you use this as a marketing tool here. Family's been such a major part of that, of your life. Talk to me about your dad. What did he do?
My dad worked for the city,
Did he?
you know, laying bricks on streets, you know.
Did he emigrate over to the, James, did he immigrate over from Italy, or?
He came, my mother and father did not come together.
Okay.
My mother and father both came, well, my father came first, and he went to live with his sister. And then my mother came, and, my father came, and then my mother came to live with her brother, Pete Parsolini, my uncle Pete. And my father had a fruit wagon where he would ring the bell, you know, go to the neighborhoods and ring the bell and sell fruit, whatever, vegetables. And he noticed this girl answered the door. He hadn't seen her before. And he asked my uncle, "Who is that?" He said, "That's my sister, Josephine." He naturally was interested and made arrangements to see her. And the rest of the story, I'm one of 7 children. I have 3 brothers. My brother Phil was a barber. Maybe some of you got your haircuts from him. My brother Ross sold shoes for 50 years, Roselle shoes. My brother Joe is now in North Carolina. He worked at Crescent Tool for many years and accompanied them when they went to move their facility down to North Carolina. It was known as Cooper Industries. I had 3 sisters. My sister Grace, who passed away at the age of 91. My sister Sarah passed away at the age of 85. And today, my sister Ann is 95 years old. And she's now recuperating from a fall, and she's doing therapy work at Harridge on Prather Avenue. And I went to visit her this afternoon, as I did every afternoon. And she is really making progress, believe it or not. She is doing fine. At 95, she's very mentally alert, and we're excited about her coming home shortly. Let me bare my soul. My mother lived 26 years as a widow. My father died when I was 19. And you know, when you're only 19 and your dad passes away, you really don't have that opportunity to have what you call the adult conversations with your dad, with your father. Because we were busy as teenagers, spending all the time we could possibly spend at the Boys Club. 2 o'clock to 5:30, 6:45 to 9 every day. We even asked the director, Mr. Clements, if we could play there on Sunday. And he gave us that opportunity, of course, with responsibility. And he gave us that opportunity. So when you stop and think of the time I spent at the club, but I did help my father work in the garden. I helped my father saw wood. But I never sat down and had what I call an adult conversation. But with my mother, for 26 years, yes, I had all the opportunity. And my mother could not speak English. My mother could not read. My mother could not write. But my mother knew what love was all about. I remember she used to hide her money in a chest. You know, she'd gather a few dollar bills and put them away like most people did in those days. And one day she asked me to count the money she had between the pillowcases and the bed sheets. It amounted to $600. And I said, Ma, you shouldn't have this here. You got to put it in the bank. And she said, okay, you take me to the bank. My mother worked at the Hotel Jamestown in the kitchen. So I met her after work one day. She worked the early morning. And I took her to the bank. And we deposited the money in her name. And I told the teller my mother does not know how to write. She said, well, when she comes to make a deposit, all she has to do is make an X. We will witness it. You could witness that transaction. And so my mother did that. When a payday, she would stop, maybe deposit a few dollars. I didn't keep track of it. But after a couple of months, she asked me to check her bank book. And I did. And I gave her the total that she had. And I told her, Ma, believe it, they added $2 and some cents of interest. And she said, what's that? I said, well, that's the money you earned because you put the money in the bank. She wanted me to read that book every week after that. She thought they do it steady. But that was my mother. And when I was young, 12 years old, I had to go to the hospital, major operation. My mother came with me and stayed with me the night before the operation. The hospital could not budge her from wanting to be by my bed and take care of me that evening before I go into the operating room. She told the nurse, you take care of the other people, I'll take care of my son. I caught the chicken pox while I was in the hospital. I had to be moved to the contagious hospital because you couldn't be in the ward with other kids. It was a winter, November, December. And my mother came every day and stood outside the window to see me every day. I had an operation at 16 on my foot. I had to have it in Buffalo. My mother, believe it or not, she left work at the hotel, went to the corner of Cherry Street and 4th, where the bus station was. I don't know how she did it, but she got on the bus to Buffalo. I don't know how she even asked for a cab, but she got to the hospital. And there she stood waiting again like she did before, right at my bed, waiting for the day they operated. That's just part of the story.
Well, I suspect when you talk on the radio and you say live, love, and enjoy, when you say that, you think of your mother.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we had your 6 siblings here, if we had your brothers and sisters sitting around here, and I asked them the question, what was Jim like growing up, what would they say?
Oh, I treasure my boyhood. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I treasure the friends I had. You have to remember in those days that the neighborhoods were ethnic neighborhoods. I lived on Franklin Street. And you want to know the names of the families on Franklin Street? You ready? Okay. Panabianco, Nicastro, Luca, Trusso, Piazza, Riolo, did I make Muscarellas? Let's see, did I miss any? Moratos, Polinos. There were 2 families, non-Italian. We wondered, what are they doing here? You know who they were? One was George Sudholme. Remember Sudholme with the municipal band? You know, and the other was Bob Landrigan, who married the Lockwood girl from the Lockwood store.
Yeah.
That was the neighborhood.
Now
Well, the neighborhood in those days, you were a son of every family in the neighborhood. You know, you could be playing ball on the farthest end of the street. And if you were thirsty, I could enter the home that was closest to it. I didn't have to run home to get a glass of water. I would go into the Morano residence and get a glass of water. You were a son of the neighborhood.
So in that neighborhood, while you're playing all those games and baseball, who was your role model?
Bill Stern.
Bill Stern. Tell us why.
I listened to him on Saturday afternoons doing college football. And I just suddenly thought, God, what an exciting day, a job he's got. There he is doing a game, and there he is describing it and giving us a chance to use our imagination. You know, TV wasn't here yet, folks. Radio is full of imagination. And I thought, wouldn't that be fun to do those games, a job you love, and describe it to people? Paint the picture of the action, like Bill Stern did. And I thought, I can't play it professionally. I can't be a good writer about it. Why don't I try to be an announcer?
Did you mimic him at all?
In a way, yeah. Sure.
Did you practice at all?
Yeah, sure.
How did that happen?
Well, I used to, the guys would be playing football in the neighborhood. I would pick up a stick or whatever it was, pretend it was a microphone, and while they were playing, I would do a play-by-play. I'd play the game, you know, and try to create the game. Greg, I'll tell you the story. Remember the football pools that used to come out? You could play a pool for bet money on how the games would come out. Mm-hmm. This was a New Year's Day. In those days, there were only 4 bowl games. 4. The Rose Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, and the Orange Bowl. So I picked 4 teams to win those games. Mm-hmm. And I bet $2. And the odds were 17 to 1. And I picked the right game, or the right score. I won $34.
Wow.
I hurried to the Peerless Photo on Cherry Street. Remember Peerless?
Are you?
And I asked Mr. Swanson there. I said, can I put a down payment on a tape recorder? You know, I'll give you $34 down payment, and can I pay a couple dollars a week for the balance? He said, sure, Jim. So I got my Revere recorder with tape. And I went home and I couldn't wait to put it on. And I grabbed the newspaper and picked the baseball lineup out of it, Greg, you know? So I just played the fantasy game. Yeah. I looked at the lineup and I would start the game by saying the starting lineup for the New York Giants, batting first, batting second, and so forth. And then you'd create a game. You'd play the game of saying, here's the pitch, there's a ground ball headed towards short, throw to first, out, you know, whatever the case may be. And I just got into that world, you know, anxious to do it, and that's the way I tried to get myself involved in how can I create the excitement? How can I be as exciting as Bill Stern was? And so I did everything in my power, at least to accomplish that.
Did the New York Giants always win?
No. You want to hear a story about the Giants?
I do.
Okay. I hope you're not finding this boring, folks. At St. Lawrence University, where I went, we had what they call a touch football league. Touch football. You had to touch the guy with two hands. Believe it or not, this little Sicilian boy was quarterback for the frat team. Yeah, I was a quarterback, Sigma Pi. We were going to play the dorm team that day, that particular day. We got to the field where we're going to play, and here comes this team, and their quarterback is 6'2", you know, and I watched him warm up for the game, and he's throwing the football 40 yards, right? I'm barely throwing it 15. So we play the game. We get whipped 35-0. Okay, but let me tell you the rest of the story. Like Paul Harvey would say. That boy, that player, was playing baseball for the Jersey City Giants.
No kidding.
A farm club of the New York Giants. It's 2 years later, 1951, and the Giants are playing the Brooklyn Dodgers in a one-game playoff to determine who will go to the World Series. If some of you can look back that far, you'd remember, if you're a baseball fan, this game. Because in the bottom of the ninth, Bobby Thompson hit the home run for the Giants to win. They were losing 3-1. It was called the shot heard round the world. Bobby Thompson was the quarterback of that team that I played in touch football.
That's great. I've never heard that. That's great.
You have now.
I have now. You, just so biographically, you were a 1944 class of Jamestown High School. Your class president was Charlie Goodell.
Right.
And it was actually Charlie who was an inspiration coming back in 1974, 75, that actually introduced you to Chautauqua.
That's right.
How did that work?
Well, before 1974, every summer I would read the Chautauqua program, and I would comment it on the radio. You know, I would just read about who's going to be there, what to look forward to. And when that program of that year came out, I looked at it, and I suddenly saw Charlie Goodell is going to be the lecturer for a subject titled, the abuse of government power. As you know, he replaced Bobby Kennedy as senator, and then Richard Nixon did not want him to run on his ticket. He did not want Charlie as his senator from New York. He wanted James Buckley. So Charlie had to run as an independent and didn't win. And Richard Nixon did not like Charlie because he was one of the first voices against the Vietnam War. So I said to myself, I've got to go to Chautauqua. Charlie will give me an interview. My class president, we even played ball against each other. And I felt confident that I would get an interview. So I quickly jumped in the car, drove up to Chautauqua, and asked permission. And I just said, may I do my show? And it gave him the following story. And I said I would just look forward to the local audience hearing their former senator and congressman. I think it's our duty as a public service to do that. And they said, where are you going to broadcast from? And I said, well, I'm only 127 pounds. I don't take up much room. So I said, how about the patio? at the refectory. I'll sit in the corner, you know. And they said, well, we don't see any problem with that. And so I quickly went back to the studio, and I went into Mr. Williams' office, our general, and I said, Carl, I'm going to Chautauqua when Charlie Goodell gives a talk. He said, you are? I said, yeah. I said, isn't it our job to do public service? Isn't it our job to bring on the local stories? And I said, let's do it. And he said, here's a salesman for you. You think anybody will buy it? I said, even if they don't buy it, we really are obligated to do it. You know, let's do it. So he said, okay, let's get the engineering taken care of. So they did. And I stayed that week, 1 week. And I had Charlie twice during the week as a guest. But in between, I had nobody else. But Winnie Llewellyn, a teacher at Maple Grove,
Right.
a very revered teacher, was hostess at the Wensley House, where the guests stay. You know, all the lecturers, some of the performers stay. And I said to Winnie, Winnie, can you talk any of them into coming on the radio? You know, maybe 10, 15 minutes. Can you persuade them? She did. She gave me Margaret Mead. She gave me Dr. Christian Bernard, who gave the first transplant in the world. What more could I ask? So the week was over, right? Monday morning, I go to work, and I'm called into the office. And they said to me, Jim, we've gotten what you call feedback from your show last week. A lot of feedback. You want to do it again? What a silly question, huh? So I said, I'll tell you what, Carl. If we're going to do it, we do it every week. Why should it be just 1 week? Every week. There's a different theme, a different subject, and you have a gold mine of possibilities. And they decided, okay, but you have to leave room for other shows. So we decided we'd do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then we'd leave Thursday and Friday open for special shows that they sold. And you know who bought a lot of those shows? Joe Caprino. He had a promotion about every week, right? And I had to be on location. For Joe Caprino, 37 years as the furniture dealer, I probably did 1,000 or more remotes.
Go see Joe.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And answer your phone. Caprinos were the best cost less. Yeah. Oh, we had a lady, by the way. I had a story told to me by her son. He says, Jim, see, you had to answer the phone. Caprinos were the best cost less. You couldn't say hello. If you answered that way, you'd win the jackpot. And it built up, I think, $2 a day or $5 a day. And this fellow told me, he said, Jim, I called my mother in Florida. She was there visiting with her daughter. She answered the phone. Caprinos were the best cost less. She said, why not? They might have called me, Florida. That's it.
My mother still does that. At Chautauqua, though, we could go, this line of questioning could go on, I'm sure, forever, but was there a guest or two, Jim, that just, let me back up. Everybody should know, because I've seen him in action, Not only is he the best interviewer by far, but he works at it. He is not flying by the seat of his pants. Jim is incredibly nimble, but it's based on just good old hard work research. So when you may listen to him from 9 to 12 at Chautauqua, if you sashay over to the James Prendergast Library in the afternoon, he's there reading the newspaper, current events, he's reading the books regarding the authors who he hopes to see the next day. So he works very, very hard so that he is well prepared, and that's why you're the mayor of Bester Plaza. But I gotta guess, Jim, there's just, no matter how well prepared you are, there are a couple that have just thrown you way off. You just couldn't possibly anticipate what it is that they said. Just a real surprise. Who are those one or two that just come to mind?
That surprised me, you know?
Yeah?
One of them was Freeman Dyson, the great physicist. I think he won the Nobel Prize for physics, Princeton University. That was one occasion where I felt I wasn't in his league, basically. I tiptoed through the tulips, you know what I mean? Trying to be as conversant as I could. But basically, Greg, I had a good time with him. I really did. Yeah. I wouldn't call it one ideal, but he seemed pleased at the conversation. But even a couple of people realized I didn't get too scientific, you know. And yet that's a subject I love to talk about now, about our universe. I love to talk about it because I've said this so many times on radio. I look up at night and look at the stars, and you have to ask yourself, what's it all about? What is it up there? I mean, how did this all come about? Why do we have the rhythm that the world has? Why do we have night and day and sunset and sunrise? I mean, how did this rhythm get in place? You can't help, at least I don't think. Greg, I would think you'd feel the same way, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you'd feel the same way. I had Freeman Dyson a second time, and we were talking about longevity. What is happening? I particularly posed the question about longevity because I said, Mr. Dyson, he's pretty much up there in age. And I said, we're living longer. And I said, what do you project as a possible age that we could attain? And he said, the way it's going right now, 100 will not be a surprise anymore. 100 years, it'll become common, normal. He said, the possibility, I think, is 120. Well, it so happens that I had a fellow who had coffee with me every morning. His name was Mark, his first name. And he was 80-some years old. He would come and sit with me, anticipating my guest. And so Mark was sitting right there as I was interviewing Freeman Dyson. And when he said 120, I turned to Mark. I said, Mark, how would you like that? 120. You know what he said? Are you kidding? I'd be married to the same woman for 95 years.
That's well, levity is a major part of what you always brought to the table. Just laughter, having the ability to keep things light. And I got to believe you've had a chance with Dr. Ruth, Mark Russell, you do that annually, and also Loretta LaRoche.
Oh God. Oh man. You can't get enough of Loretta LaRoche. You can't. Don't sweat the small stuff. You all relate to it. You all relate to it. She tells you, you know, and I related to it easily. She would tell you about her family and say that, here my mother bought a new sofa, but we can't sit on it. Right? Oh yeah, you got to leave it for the guests. Or she bought new dishes and never used them. Right? Those kind of things.
Right, Cindy? Where is she?
It was amazing. For Loretta. She's given me 3 interviews. Well, let me say, Greg, I hope I'm not stealing your thunder here, but
This is what we want.
the thing that pleases me most is when I've had the guests for the first time. If they come back 2 or 3 years later, or even then, I'm pleased that they want to be interviewed again. They come to be interviewed again. And that gives me a pleasure, because I think they don't take the attitude, well, this guy works for a hokey-pokey local station, right? He doesn't need me again. But that's not true. I've had David McCullough 3 times. The great historian gives me the pleasure of his company each time he comes. It's amazing.
Well, you've also interviewed presidents-to-be, like Bill Clinton.
Oh, yeah.
What was he like?
Well, he was governor of Arkansas. I just told somebody in the audience the story during the intermission. He was governor of Arkansas, and it was June 1991, and when he arranged for the interview, and he came to be interviewed. I remember one of the first things he said, I'm told that I'll never get out of this alive. But anyway, a month later, at the Democratic Convention, he was picked as the nominee for the Democratic Party. During the time that he was with me, a gentleman who had coffee with me every morning, I call it the Breakfast Club. You've heard me say that. He was taking pictures of the occasion, right, that I had Mr. Clinton. I think you've seen the picture out in the lobby. That photo you see with me of Bill Clinton was taken by Howard Sanders of Florida. And he made a huge picture of it, really, one you rolled up. And he brought it to me one morning. And he said, we're going to send this to Washington. We'll have him autograph it. Believe it or not, Greg, you talk about timing. My guest that morning, Frank Fahrenkoff, the Republican chairman, chairman of the Republican Party, my guest that morning, Charles Manat, chairman of the Democratic Party. They were my guests coming to be interviewed. So he saw the picture. He said, what are you going to do with it? I said, we're going to send it to Washington. Hopefully he'll autograph it. He said, you don't have to send it. I'll take it there for you because I'm going to see him next week. Yeah. And I'll have him autograph it for you. There it is, folks.
Yeah.
Right out in the lobby.
It's terrific. Yeah. You've also had a chance to talk to, history, and I know some have really been highlights. When you talked to Liz Carpenter, who was the secretary for LBJ, she was an original.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No question. No question about it. She had a great sense of humor, fabulous sense of humor, and told a lot of stories with me. Russ Dietrich and I do the Times of Your Life, right? So I said to Russ, we're going to interview Liz Carpenter for Saturday morning. She gave me permission. I had to go pick her up at Chautauqua and bring her to the studio. And Russ, what a fabulous idea he had. He got Les Ostrander to give us the 1922 Pierce Arrow, the car, to go pick up, well, Les drove the car. So we drove up to pick up Liz Carpenter, press secretary to Lady Bird Johnson. And we drove into the grounds to go where Liz was staying. Everybody ran out of their cottages, and those on the street, they all went to get their cameras, and they all wanted to pose with the car. You know, they didn't even wait for Liz yet. But yeah, we drove Liz Carpenter to the studio to interview her, and then on the way back, she said, "Would you please stop? I'd like to get a quart of milk." So we stopped to get her a quart of milk. And then she said, "Do you mind if we go to the grocery store that's by the institution? I'd like to get some other..." So we went on a shopping trip with Liz Carpenter.
By the way, that car was also owned by a guy named Babe Ruth as well.
That's right.
Yeah,
That was Babe Ruth's car.
yeah, exactly. The Times of a Life, like with Rush there, I mean, that has now become institutionalized. How did that get started? Did somebody have that idea?
Yeah. A fellow named Ron Page
Okay.
came to me one day, and maybe he went to Russ first, I'm not sure. But he did suggest, he said, "Look, you two guys," you know, the way he put it, it's a selling point. "You two guys, you know, with what you do, the way you're involved in the community," he said, "why don't you two guys get together and do a show and call it The Times of Your Life and talk to people, get their stories, you know." And Russ has heard me 1,001 times. My philosophy of life is everybody's a story. Everybody. There are no two people alike. They have a different chemistry. They have a different outlook. They have different ideas. They have different adventures. They're all a story. I'm as delighted to interview the man collecting garbage as I am delighted to interview a president. I get as much joy out of each one because we're all a story. Every one of us is a story.
Speaking of stories, I can't help being a kid brought up on Corv and Swedish meatballs, wondering what the hell is a Garduni sandwich?
Okay, I hope you believe these stories are true, because they are true. I was doing a show from a super duper market, and this lady came in. No, not a lady, I'm sorry. I'll tell you about that other lady in a moment. I'll tell you about a fellow, though, that came in, and he looked at me and he said, "Roselle, you're a giant baseball fan." I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Well, I'm a Pirate fan, the Pittsburgh Pirates." I said, "Wonderful." He said, "They're playing this weekend. They're playing a 3-game series." He said, "Do you want to make a bet?" And I said to myself, I don't want to bet money on radio. You know, I didn't think that was the proper thing to do. I wasn't going to wager on radio money. And I thought, okay, I'll make you a wager. He said, "What will it be?" And my head is going crazy. And just suddenly I said, "I'll bet you a Garduni sandwich." And he looked at me and said, "What the hell is a Garduni sandwich?" I said, "Well, wait a minute. Maybe you don't know what it is, but if you win the bet, I'll give you a Garduni sandwich. But if you lose the bet, you have to find somebody to make a Garduni sandwich." And you probably know what it is now, I think, by now. It's burdock. It's burdock. You take burdock, beat it in eggs, add cheese and flour. Well, you have to strip the burdock, though, and clean it. It's hard work, but you make a wonderful sandwich out of it, more than that. And what happened was I go back to the studio, and the receptionist tells me, "We're getting some calls. Is there a thing such as a Garduni sandwich?" No, really. And I said, "Yes." And I said, you know what happened? The Italian ladies in this community, those who were listening to me, about 2 days later, I get a bag full of burdock. They picked it for me, brought it to the studio. Well, I went home and gave it to my sister, Ann. And I said, Ann, look what we've got. And she's wonderful. So she did her expert job as always and made great Garduni sandwiches. I get another bag later from another listener. It got out of hand. My sister said, that's enough. Really, that's enough. So what happened, some people, even the Brookaleries, one family, and the Jeffritas and the Lavermes, you know what they did? They made the sandwiches first and brought me the sandwich. And I get a sandwich. Pat Carr of Lakeview Gardens, every May, brings me a dish full of Garduni. What's his name? Tony Mara from Falconer. When I'm at the mall doing a remote, brings me a bag full of Garduni sandwiches. Every year. Garduni, yeah. That was just off the top of my head. But it became a big symbol of some kind, you know. Have you tasted it?
I have not. So next time you get some, call me and I shall arrive. Okay, just to try it.
Hey, Julie, where are you? Well, can I introduce my family?
Sure, please do.
Oh, please let me. I can't see in the dark here. My wife, Kathy, is with me. Kathy, stand up, please. Where are you?
There we go.
Stand up, Kath. You know what? She even thought, after the Garduni sandwich became famous, she had a Garduni party at the studio. She figured, why not take the opportunity and get some listeners who are totally confused. Let's have a party and let's let them taste it. And so we did. How many showed up, Kath? 200? 200 people showed up. And Charlie Goodell did all the work and made the Garduni sandwiches. Because of Kath. What'd she say?
She said she forgot my invitation.
Okay, let me introduce, Julie, my daughter. Julie, where are you? Where are you, Jewel?
Stand up.
And boy, I'm blessed because my granddaughter's here from Columbus, Ohio. Michelle, stand up. She blessed me with my first great-grandchild. Just a year ago, a little over a year ago. Mason is his name. Wow, I can't wait to see him. He's waiting after the show's over.
So, every morning I listen to you having this cup of happiness. As another one of your cup of happiness, another one of those signature lines of yours, that must have had some genesis someplace.
Well, it so happened that I had the morning show at 8:15 in the morning. I used to replace Doc Webster, Dennis Webster's father.
Yep.
He opened up at 5, and he would work till 8:15. Then I would take over at 8:15 and work till noon. Well, then Doc Webster passed away, died. And the station decided that I should open up the early morning show at 6 o'clock. And whenever that opportunity comes about, I always take the attitude, okay, I'm opening up at 6 in the morning. How can I relate to the audience at that time what can I welcome them with? You know what I mean? Welcome them to the show. And I figure everybody, turns to a cup of coffee immediately in the morning, or hopefully they do, And I thought, okay, I think what I'll do is just welcome them to the day, and then just say, let me enjoy and believe it or not, Greg, I just quickly just said, I'm not going to call it a cup of coffee. I'll call it a cup of happiness. And that's what it is. It's a cup of happiness. Right.
Yeah. Gets us all going. Speaking of happiness, you've worked at WJTN obviously for over 60 years.
Yeah.
You've been there, and that's an incredible run. What does Cy Goldman really mean to a Jim Roselle? What's Cy Goldman mean to you? When they say Cy Goldman, he's obviously was your boss, but was he a special guy to you?
Yes, because he always left with me the opportunity that he would call it, if you have an idea, let's use it. Because radio is such where, at least you can start with the idea. If it doesn't work, okay, cancel it and turn to something else. But he always said, if you've got an idea, don't be reluctant to try to use it, whatever you feel you want it to be part of your show.
Right.
And I always thought that's a nice piece of freedom to think of things and institute them. And he was right. That's why Chautauqua came about. That was an idea. Go ahead and follow it through. And he would okay it. He would endorse it. And as long as it kept rolling along, Greg, I didn't expect Chautauqua from 1 week to be here 40 years later.
Yeah.
And now I go every day,
Yeah.
5 days a week. And it's a minefield, really. Where do you possibly think someone in a local station is going to have the opportunity to chat with Nobel Prize winners, Tony Award winners, poet laureates, authors, historians of every profession that's possible, Greg? You do it here. Let me take a moment to praise this man. I mean, this community should be grateful that he had his idea of what this center could be like. He had the idea. And stop and think of what he's accomplished. Stop and think of this man getting in touch with the best legal minds available in the world to come here to honor Robert Jackson and to talk about their lives. There is no community that has that prize that this man has given us. I mean, what community in this country can boast of having 3 Chief Justices come to visit them?
Jim, we're going to interview Greg next year. Don't change the format.
But hold it, he's on a roll. I like what he's doing. Do we have that, Ed? Good. Jim, thank you, Jim.
Are we on too long?
No, are you kidding me? I just a couple more things, and then we will conclude with something very special. Pete Hubble, I saw him not so long ago.
Okay.
And Pete reminded me of something I just vaguely remember, but you and he did something which Cy Goldman obviously permitted to do, and that was something called Goofy Golf, where you guys actually, it's unbelievable when he recounted that. What was that
Goofy
about?
Golf. We took a golf ball and a putter. We were in the Hotel Jamestown, and the idea was to putt that ball all the way to Maplehurst, right from the studio. We started right at the door of the studio. We putted the ball to the elevator. You open the door to the elevator, put the ball in the elevator. Go down the elevator, put the ball out. Put it out of the Hotel Jamestown, put it down 3rd Street, over Fairmount, over the Fairmount Avenue. We're putting along the highway. Believe it or not, putting that ball, here cars are coming at us, but we're putting the ball at them. We were worried we might break a car window or something. And it was a contest. Would I put fewer than Pete Hubble, or would I put more? How many strokes? And we finally reached Maplehurst. Had to put the ball on the course and put it in the hole.
My God.
And we had girl caddies. Yeah. They carried a bag.
They carried a bag, yeah.
A 1 club bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know the idea of eye candy. I know what you're up to.
Yeah. But that's what radio's about. That's where radio can be creative. Stop and think of just taking a microphone and going any place and do a show. Look at the technology today of a reporter. I mean, you're at the studio, and here I get Tom Morgan, that you hear in the mornings. He calls me from wherever he's at. He's my guest every Wednesday at 10:30 in the morning. In addition to that, he's on Money Talk at 7:55. But Tom and I have become very close friends. But wherever he goes, he places a phone call to me. He called me from Paris. And the call came in as if he's calling from across the street.
Yeah.
And I told him to let me talk to the waitress that was waiting on him. So I had a conversation with a waitress in Paris. No, really. That may sound silly, but that's the technology of the day. And that's why radio is still the most convenient, the most used medium, I think. And the fact that you can, at any time, be at any spot and deliver a story or a message. It's amazing.
Well, and you were talking about the minefield as Chautauqua, but nobody minds it better than you, because you create that theater of the mind, M-I-N-D, like nobody else. But you had some amazing practice, because I used to either watch you live or listen to you when you used to do the Temple Hezed Abraham sports dinners, and there was, from a sports celebrity world, nobody ever assembled any more sports celebrities than Cy Goldman and the Temple Hezed Abraham, and yet you were right there in the middle of all that.
Oh, yes. Well, they had the Crystal Ballroom where they had the sports dinner. Our studio was right there. So we were conveniently located to go in and get the stars that were here. I used to run and get them for Pete Hubble or Max Robinson, and I would escort them to the studio. I escorted Joe Louis. I escorted Rocky Graziano, Whitey Ford, Mickey Mantle, Jim Braddock. If I brought the list, you'd have to be here till midnight. But I had the opportunity to get Dick Williams.
Tell that story.
Yeah. Dick Williams, a manager of the Red Sox, right? Are you familiar with baseball? Well, anyway, he was a manager of the Red Sox, and he came to town to deliver a talk at the town club. And I thought, I'll get my recorder and go down and interview him. It was a lunch hour. So I went quickly to the town club with my recorder. And I got Dick Williams, and I said, let's go upstairs and because the dining room was busy, very busy, and noisy. So we went upstairs. Unfortunately, that dining room upstairs was busy because they had another banquet. And so I said, we've got to find a spot, Dick, for where it's quiet. You know what he said? Let's go to the men's room. Seriously. We went to the men's room. I placed my recorder on the sink, plugged it in, and believe it or not, do any of you know Milt Battler? He used to have the Hotel Jamestown, right? He came in to do his duty. No, seriously. I'm interviewing Dick Williams, and he's doing his duty right here. I think you could hear the splash on the radio. And you know what he did? He got done, see? And then I saw him scribbling a note. He was writing a note. And then he handed it to me as he left. And I'm interviewing Dick, he's answering a question. And I looked at it, and it said, "Nobody will ever believe this." And you know what Dick said after the interview was over? "This story's going on the chicken and biscuit circuit." He says, "I've got this story to tell everywhere I go." Russ Dietrich loves that story.
I love that story, but that's the first time you've ever identified the man. It's in archives. You know, it's because of those stories, those kinds of interviews, wherever it would happen to take Jim Roselle, that he was recognized. He was recognized in 2010 by the New York State Broadcasters, and he was inducted into their Hall of Fame. And I'd like to pause right now, and we'll just take a look, Jim, over our shoulder, and we're going to see the introductory information on that. Maybe. While that's being tooled up, one of the things that is always, I made a note of this, and this was a Russ Dietrich comment, that Jim Roselle, and he would always say, Jim Roselle with an E,
Right.
not an I,
Right.
because there is no I in Jim Roselle.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, that really is a remarkable statement. In fact, it was, this took a long time to load up this afternoon when we tried that. Talk a little bit about that 2010 induction. A little bit about, I mean, it's a very prestigious honor, Jim, you got.
That came about through Merrill Rosen, and it was Merrill's idea to put the nomination in. I didn't know about it. I really didn't. They decided to put together the resume of my career, and they thought that should get some attention from the Broadcasters Association because of what you have done over the years, and particularly the interviews and other events. You know, I've had the good, when you stop and think of what this community has done for me, I mean, please let me thank you all, because for you to invite me into your home, for you to invite me into your car, for you to invite me in your transistor, and do that maybe on a daily basis or whatever time you can afford. I've got to be very grateful for that. You've kept me employed. You've kept me literally employed because of what you've done. You literally have. You know, there are people that have asked me, when are you going to retire? And I say to myself, retire from what? Or to what? I never developed a hobby that I could turn to. My hobby's my work. You know, I remember a lady, in fact, if I did think of retirement, it came about. I mean, the thought occurred to me after a while, maybe it's time. But I've told this story before. A lady came to me on an on-location show. And she looked at me for a moment and then wanted to really identify that I was Jim Roselle. And I said, yes, I'm Jim Roselle. And she says, I want to tell you something. And I said, what is it? She says, every morning I roll over in bed and turn you on. So I decided not to retire. That's a true story.
You know, as you go down memory lane, of which is what we've been doing here, you have also worked with a wonderful array of fellow broadcasters at WJTN. Could you just sort of recap a few of those?
Oh, God. Greg, my colleagues have been superb. I mean, the support, the encouragement they gave me. You know, I was a rookie. I was green. And I remember having to, when they gave me the full-time job, I remember my first duty was to stand behind Doc Webster as he was going to introduce Paul Harvey. Many of you have listened to Paul Harvey right over the years. He had the 1 o'clock show, 15-minute show, and I stood there watching how he would introduce Paul Harvey on ABC. And he had to take a break for a commercial. Paul Harvey used to give you the cue, page 2. Do you remember that? Well, when he said that, that was your turn to clip him off and put your own commercial in. 1 minute. You got 1 minute to get that commercial in and then get back to Paul Harvey. And I kept saying to myself, will I be able to do that? Will I time it right? You know, all that sort of challenge. And that was the start. But everybody was encouraging, supportive, and they were great to work with. They were fun. I really wish people could look at their jobs as being fun. You know, it's serious, but it's also fun. And if you can go there and take that attitude, you've got it made. But Max Robinson, out of Buffalo, was the race announcer for Buffalo Raceway and Batavia Downs. Pete Hubble, whose father is a legend in Buffalo, Ralph Hubble, a legend. Pete followed in his dad's footsteps. And what a joy it was to work with Pete. We worked the Babe Ruth World Series. It was great. Russ Dietrich, you know, what a supporter. Ladies and gentlemen, there's the most genuine, authentic man in the community. Give him a round of applause. I'm working with Dennis Webster. It's a real pleasure. Working with Larry Saraki and Merrill Rosen and Jack Dunnigan. I'm done again.
That's right.
Yep.
Melba Weber.
Melva Weber, down through you've got John Mahoney. He went on to become a big announcer in Cleveland, Ohio. Our greatest graduate, by the way, at JTN was Marshall Shantz. His professional name was Rex Marshall. And he did Pepsodent commercials, Reynolds Aluminum commercials, and he did live commercials on The Tonight Show. He was our greatest graduate. He went to ABC.
Yeah.
Then he bought a radio station in New Hampshire. But there's so many, Greg. I don't want to leave anybody out. We've got, let me introduce a young man here. Matt Warren, where are you? Stand up, Matt. What a joy that young man is. His dad is Dan Warren. He works on Hug. But here's a guy, graduate of Frewsburg, graduate of Fredonia. Ladies and gentlemen, he's looking for a job. Yeah, he is. He wants to be an English teacher. He's gone to how many interviews, Matt?
11, Jim.
11 interviews. He flew all the way to Arizona to be interviewed. The competition in the field he wants to be in is so severe. If I was a principal or of hiring, that young man should be an English teacher. He's going to be an inspiration to people. He is so energetic, so full of life. He helps me at Chautauqua and at the golf course. And it's a pleasure to work with him. I wish him the best.
Well, Jim, I think we have now tooled up. If we can show the...
There it is.
There it is, the introduction.
Those are the other inductees.
Yep.
Yeah, there they are.
Morning, hometown Jamestown and neighbors. Welcome to the Jim Roselle Show. It happens to be the first day of the rest of your life.
Hi, friends. We're all set to go with the Jim Roselle Show.
Chautauqua County's Jim Roselle has been the voice of Jamestown for over half a century, where his interviews with famous personalities are legendary.
Governor Clinton, my sincere thanks for giving us some time.
Thanks, Jim. I'm glad to be here, and I look forward to being on this program. Everybody around here says that you're legendary, and I'll be lucky to walk out of here in one piece.
Well, I hope we got that on tape.
Well, radio became part of my life when I was a young boy. I just thought, that's one fabulous career. If there was a possibility, I'd like to go into radio and do that.
At St. Lawrence College, Jim followed his dream by doing play-by-play announcing for the college's sports teams, and in 1953 joined WJTN as a part-time sportscaster. Little did Roselle know, that job was truly the beginning of a life of excellence in broadcast and community involvement. Roselle grew up during the golden age of radio. Dick Clark's American Bandstand was the impetus for Roselle's Friday Night Hop. Beginning with 96 kids, the popularity of the show wound up averaging 900 kids.
There's an old saying that if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. And I don't think I've worked a day in my life.
Roselle's style of interviewing is much different from those of other talk show hosts. His detailed research, knowledge, and insight often surprise and impress his guests.
Dr. Jane Goodall keeps autographing book after book after book. Is your right hand in good shape?
My right hand's in pretty good shape, except where a chimp bit the end of my thumb off.
Roselle, whose career has taken him to Vienna, Austria, Germany, England, Italy, and the Soviet Union, has interviewed hundreds of powerful and well-known people. It is the common person in the local community that Jim relates to most.
Mayor, good to see you.
Good to see you.
I understand you're running for re-election.
That's not what I'm here to talk about.
It's a challenge every day. No 2 days are alike. You become part of the community in a sense. You can't be great enough for people who give you that invitation to be part of their lives.
And the community came out in force for Roselle's 55th anniversary on the air. And he was in for an unforgettable moment himself.
Second chorus. With his interviewees, who's got all the expertise. Bless me, Father, I have sinned. Roselle. Oh, Jim Roselle still has that fire in the belly.
I'm living the impossible dream. What more could a man of this business ask for?
On the Chautauqua porch with Jim Roselle.
Normally it's at this time where I sign off for the interviews that I do, but I'd be foolish to do that. So we'll conclude by having Jim, you sign off this particular interview with however you want to sign off this interview.
You want my sign off?
Whatever you would like. This is you.
Well, my sign off each day is thank you for your company. Take good care of this day. Live, love, and enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Roselle.